So people look at the world in different ways, don't they? They look at the world through their iPhones these days. Now, when I was growing up, we used newspapers and you could see everything. You saw things whether you wanted to or not. Now we see them through iPhones and we get our own different slice of what we see. So different people will see different things. And what I'm looking at here is what are the potential impacts that could happen to transform work? What would happen to our Christian workplace groups, our sector leads, etc.? And I think we can look at three lenses. First one being overall society, second one being workplace, which is obvious, and the third one is the church. And all of these, yet again, we've seen another year of change already. So if you go back 5 years and you think back to COVID, that was a huge time of change. And what we're doing now was very unusual. At the time, it was expected about 15 years before Zoom calls or equivalent became the norm. They became the norm within about 2 or 3 months. So looking at this, if we look at society, clearly we could have put Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves around there. We could have looked at the increase in employer to NI, the cost increases, which I'm sure Stephen's well aware of. But if we look at the top image there, we look at Donald Trump, and Donald Trump took office on January the 20th. And by a month later, he started to put tariffs on. This is quite unusual because he said he was going to put tariffs on, and he actually did it. And a lot of governments do not actually do what they say they'll do, but people were very surprised. So Donald Trump put America first in his eyes and in the eyes of his supporters by investing in tariffs. And to start, they were quite reasonable. They were maybe 10%, 25%. China decided to do the reverse and actually put a tariff on Donald Trump, on America. And so he raised it to 125%. So some kind of element of a trade war happening there. They are now negotiating. But what's that mean for us? What it means for us is potentially it could result in a change in the way that we work. Companies could change. China may decide to send some of its goods our way rather than America. It could mean inflation. It could mean that people get unemployed. It could mean global companies relocate. So people who are working in the UK work in different parts of the world. So we can see all these things potentially change. And then reform seems to have made an improvement in its fortunes with Nigel Farage. And we saw in the local elections that there are some councils which are now run by reform, and they're trying to do things which are quite different. And I guess the key point here in terms of society probably boils down to the bottom one, what's happening with diversity, equality, and inclusion. Now, clearly workplace groups existed before diversity, equality, and inclusion. And we basically had to adapt to that and transform work. So what happens when companies in America decide that they don't like diversity anymore? What happens to our Christian workplace groups? That's something we have to consider. But probably they're so embedded that they'll just be renamed. So one thing that's happening at the moment is there are a lot of HR managers wondering, how can you continue with what we're doing? A number of them are just changing it in the form of labeling. So, for example, calling it belonging rather than individual networks. But actually, there could be more of a dramatic change than that. We'll just have to see. The point there is that we are influenced by different elements of society. And as Transform Work and as Christian Workplace Group leaders and ambassadors, we have to keep a view on what's going on, what's going to happen. Second one I'll pick up on is around the church. So at the top there, we've got a bit of a disgruntled Justin Welby, who resigned from the Church of England for various reasons. And then below that, we have the Pope, the previous Pope, Pope Francis, died, was buried in great ceremony. And then a few days later, we ended up with a new Pope, Leo XIV. Leo XIV was chosen because the previous Leo XIII was quite involved in the previous Industrial Revolution. And Robert Prevost, now the Pope, considers that workplace is very important. And if you've read any of his speeches or listened to any of them, he is actually emphasizing the everyday nature of faith. So rather than just understanding the fact that maybe the Catholic Church is better at succession planning than the Anglican Church, I think there are lessons we can be learning here. We are influenced, whether we like it or not, by the major church denominations in our country. And I think one of the most interesting things to me was that bottom box there around the quiet revival. It was a surprise to the Bible Society. So the Bible Society, I think it was about 10,000 people they reviewed before COVID, and then they reviewed them earlier in this year. And what they found is quite a dramatic change in people's views, and in particular that Gen Z are about 4 times as likely to go to church as they were before. So in terms of the church, there's a lot of change. We might find that one of the things we want to do as Transform Work is to focus on the younger generation, maybe something we want to do in our workplace groups. And then the middle aspect here is around the workplace. There's lots of things going on in the workplace. Some people are still working, I guess, remotely, but actually doing it on their kitchen tables. Still 5 years on. We still have problems on Zoom calls, etc. There's still a rebalancing going on in terms of workplace, inside an organization and outside it. And in some cases, that can be quite interesting for a workplace group. We've got examples within Transform Work where groups have not been able to get their members together, and therefore they've maybe reduced in numbers, but some of them have been quite dramatically increasing. Aviva, for example, they've gone up to 200 members online. Other groups have dramatically grown. I was talking to Ridgely yesterday. He was saying that his group has basically quadrupled. So there are opportunities there as well as challenges. And I think that's generally true. We need to keep our eyes open around society, workplace, and church, and see what can we do that will help us to grow. And the final point around this is around AI. Now, I don't think we actually know what AI is going to do for us or what the impact is going to be. Bill Gates is saying that maybe there's only 3 types of jobs that are going to be in the future. I'm not sure I'd really go down that line. Anyone who can sell Windows has got to have something. So in terms of AI, there are some very simple things we can do at the moment. We can look at ChatGPT. We can look at the way that different people look at what we're doing. For example, you can say, as a senior manager within a company, how would you see the Christian workplace group? You could say, how does a non-Christian see it? You can do that with our website. You can do that in lots of different ways. But AI does more than that. AI is going to revolutionize jobs. There are going to be potentially a lot of redundancies, or there's going to be a lot of people who are working directly with AI who aren't computer literate. All of this has an impact on our organizations, the way we want to change our organizations to transform them, and also impacts individually and impacts on our Christian workplace groups. So across these 3 sectors, we have to keep our eyes open because there are opportunities there. So that's the end of that slide, Jimmy. So this slide is basically taking forward, what are we going to do this year? Last year, we decided that we were going to adopt strategic objectives. That means that they don't necessarily finish within a year, but they are things that we have to do as an organization if we are to grow. So Stephen's talked us a bit about the Transform Work finances and the way that we want to diversify from just individual donors. And we want to grow quite dramatically. We feel that God is calling us to grow quite dramatically. And our first step will be to grow Transform Work revenue to 100,000 a year. So later in the year, we'll be talking a bit about opportunities that people can get involved in that will help us to develop 2 new income streams. But we are considering that internally first, and then we'll come out to everybody. The second one is absolutely essential. We need to increase our support for our ambassadors. So if you look at the figures that Rod presented before, you'll see that 168 groups we've lost contact with. And a fundamental for that must be the fact that our ambassadors do not have the time to contact everybody. We now have twice as many ambassadors as we had 5 years ago. and about the same number of groups. So it is improving. One of the things we want to do for all our ambassadors is to help them to develop, to learn from people like Roz, who've been doing this for about 20 years, how to do this better. There are some elements where it's difficult to actually get started. We want to work with ambassadors, help them to get kick-off from what we've learned previously. The third one here around Scotland. So Roz has talked a lot about that. I think one interesting thing as well, which didn't quite go into, was when we were praying together, there was a group at another table who came over and said, wow, that's amazing, you're praying in public. And so we prayed with them, we blessed them. And actually that's something, we should try and be doing within our workplaces. We should try and pray in public if we're allowed to. We should engage with other people and just try and grow visibly and strongly. We haven't quite made it in Scotland yet. So we did plan to set up 3 sector groups with 30 CWGs and 300 CWG members, but we're on the way. As Roz outlined before, Thrive 25 is absolutely essential. It's interesting looking at Scotland and the church in Scotland. The Church of Scotland has been closing the doors and selling buildings and a 40% reduction in congregations. So we're basically trying to reverse the trend there. And it's great to have people from Scotland on this call now who weren't here last year. Fourth one, again, is really important because it's very well for us to meet together as Christians. And that's really important that we meet together as Christians in the workplace. That helps us individually, it helps us as a group together. But are we making a difference to the organisation? Are we actually transforming it? Are we engaging with HR or senior management? Are we able to make our organisations more generous, more ethical? Are we actually changing things, or are we just meeting together? I think naturally, because you meet together, we do influence the environment, we do influence our workplace, but it's something we're looking at. How can we do that? And particularly, how can we develop Christian workplace group leaders through resources? We want to look at what the impact is. We want to monitor that, and we want to help groups to actually make a difference. Fifth one, I'll talk a bit more about in a moment. This is church workplace ministries. If you don't know very much about that, fundamentally what it is if I go to church, then can I actually talk to the people around me? Can I encourage them to, sorry, I'll talk about it now if you want. Okay.
Yeah, why don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, why not? Okay. So fundamentally, a church workplace ministry is someone in a congregation acting as a church workplace ministry lead. And what they do is they bring people together, they pray together, they use resources like our resources, Evangelical Alliance resources, LICC, they may have talks, they might encourage the leaders of the churches to preach about work or to include it. We may have prayer times around work. So it's developing place within the church, individual churches, where they concentrate on work and seek to generate individuals within the congregation make difference at their workplace. So they may set up a Christian workplace group, they may become sector lead, they may do lots of individual things, but that's the point of the church workplace ministry, pioneered by Bentley and by Peter, and having done successfully so far, it's now ready for the first stage of rollout. And you'll see on the Transform Work website that we have a page around this, including Bentley's experience from Regent Chapel in Newcastle, some guidelines on how to start and run meetings, and how to engage with Bentley and Peter to get started. So that's it. I'll go back to you. Yeah, okay. So the final point on here is one that Stephen brought to mind, was actually that although we've done very well in Scotland, we probably need to revive our presence in London. And what we're looking to do is develop a network of ambassadors that can support the opportunities in the UK capital. And I think Chris might be on the call. He's probably our first one, but we are developing this fast. So those are our strategic objectives. It's not to say that we don't do other things. What it does mean is that these are things that we focus on. And anybody who wants to support in any of those, please let us know. Do you want to go through to the final one? Yeah, okay. So what do we do over the next 5 years? Well, there's just so much we could do. You've heard from so many people this evening about things that we have done, ways we could go. So I've got a few flags there. I think we know the Welsh one. You might want to think what the other two are. So at the top, we've got the House of Commons. As Julian was outlining, we've got faith at work. Let's make a difference there. We've got international opportunities. We're linked to many organisations, including some major ones worldwide, where we could make a difference. We could maybe get alongside networks in different countries and give them a hand in terms of setting up the same sort of structure we have in the UK. You'll see there, we haven't really engaged to some extent with blue collar workers in the way that we've wanted to. There's such an opportunity there, and that's something we want to do. Clearly, we want to engage with more young workers. I think that's probably a common theme across all church workplace ministries. We want to do that. And we want to do that through prayer. So what do we do that we're not doing already in prayer? We're doing quite a lot. How do we actually take that forward? Do we have a regular fasting? Do we look more into the prophetic? What do we do? Clearly, we need more money. So, got the 100 campaign. Should that be 1,000 campaign? We've got AI, where it can change our workplaces, but it can also change our organisation here as well. What can we do in AI which will help us to develop? So, for example, we could develop a more interactive website where we allow people to engage on the website itself rather than through our ambassadors or in conjunction with our ambassadors. We've talked about church workplace ministry. Potentially, we might want to engage at various senior levels with government ministers and have roundtables, maybe form a think tank. There's lots and lots of things to do. And if you're still wondering about those flags, the one in the middle is East Anglia, and the one on the right is Southwest. I didn't know that beforehand, but those are key areas for us. So there's Wales, there's East Anglia, there's Southwest. There are other pockets within the country that we want to develop. So we could develop regionally, we could develop across sector. There's many, many things we could do. And over the next year, we'll just be reviewing what those opportunities for growth are. And if you want to engage with us on that, if you want to help us think about particular areas, just get in touch.